We have a pretty significant update on the 2021 NHL season. NHL training camps could open in as little as 3 weeks. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we got some pretty big news late last night from a variety of NHL insiders, including Darren Dreger, as well as Elliot Friedman and others, talking about the latest updates between the negotiations between the NHL and the Players Association. And we've had a pretty significant breakthrough. As we've talked about before, it seemed like they had a lot of things somewhat ironed out, and a lot of things were close to being in agreement to when it comes to how many games, the protocols, all that kind of stuff, like the easier part of the return. However, the financial side of things was still a major hurdle, and it looks as though we have a resolution to that. It looks as though the financial issue is no longer an issue. They're going to basically be going on the working agreement from the memorandum of understanding that they signed this past summer. So I'm sure from the player's standpoint, they're looking at that as an absolutely huge win. The owners came back and proposed a different set of numbers when it comes to player salary deferrals as well as the escrow, and the players dug in and absolutely said, no, we're not doing that. It looks as though they did come back and were willing to talk about a little bit more of a deferral. Obviously, the escrow part was not much of anything they wanted to look at or consider at all. But there are reports saying they did offer to maybe do some more deferrals, but that's not going to be necessary here. They're going to be working off the working agreement from the summer. So that is fantastic news to hear that the financial side of things is not going to be a stumbling block to cause the 2021 NHL season to end up being canceled. I know in the last week and a half ago, I know I come on and I talked about an update that's saying that things were not looking good and the financial aspect might be just too much to overcome if both sides get dug in too deep and are not willing to budge. Well, then, you know what? That might cause things to go sideways, and maybe we won't have a season after all. And there was certainly a bit of a negative sentiment over the overall thing from many of the connected reporters giving out the information here. So the fact that this is where it is now is absolutely a huge development. Now, it seems as though right now they're in agreement on a 56-game schedule for the 2021 season, and they're targeting a return date as far as on-ice play of January the 13th. So obviously, training camps would have to open sooner than that. So over the 7 teams who did not make the 2020 return to play playoffs would open their camps right after Christmas, around December the 28th, I believe was the date they gave for that. They're only going to get about 3 to 4 extra days compared to the other teams. It's not as much as they were hoping for, but because things have kind of drug on here long enough, that's probably the best they're going to be able to do, with all of the other teams opening up camps likely on January the 2nd. So they're going to have condensed training camps, as I mentioned before, but I think a lot of NHL teams are okay with this for a variety of reasons. For one, there's a lot of the younger players, especially, are a fair bit of them, are on loan to different teams or already on the ice, and a lot of teams already have their players back in their NHL city, kind of waiting for everything to kind of come through and get back to playing, and they're doing a lot of informal training and skating, etc. So really getting up to game shape shouldn't be as much of a challenge as it would have been otherwise. So this is big news. This means we could have training camps opening in just under 3 weeks from the time I'm recording this video on December the 8th. So today's the 8th. We're looking at around the 28th. That's about 20 days. So that also means that we should get a flurry of activity on the NHL trade and signing front, as I mentioned before. Once we have an agreement, or even as we're leading into the agreement likely going through, I would fully suspect that we're going to see a flurry of activity, because we have a number of NHL teams that are not cap compliant right now and have no choice but to shed salary. So there's that, and there's a lot of really good, talented NHL players, that don't have contracts right now, and teams are going to be scrambling to finalize their rosters. They're not going to have an extended training camp to go through and really analyze things. They're going to have to make decisions quickly so that they can get their hands on a player if they really want to make a move. So I would suspect, probably not necessarily this week, but maybe late this week into next week, we'll probably start to see some activity pick up on that front, which would be good. That means there'll be more news, more things to talk about, more real activity, which is always fun and positive thing to do here as well. Now, I do have a couple of concerns, though, leading into this. Obviously, this is right now they have an agreement in principle, but it still has to be voted on by the Players Association, and it'll have to be voted on by the executive committee, like on the ownership side. So clearly, it's expected to go through, is what everybody's saying, but you just never know until that vote takes place. Could the owners maybe come back and have enough of them say, no, we don't like that, to really cause enough of an issue here. Now, clearly, I would suspect the players won't have an issue because the players seem to be getting more about what they want. But I would suspect that the owners, in some capacity here, might find a way to get more what they want somewhere, in the near future. I'm not sure how this will impact things on the long and short term. However, we did hear that the NBA, which I know is obviously not the NHL, but still they run very comparable business models. Obviously, it's a different scale here, the NBA being a bigger business, but the NBA was giving money to each team to kind of ease the pain of the lost revenue, I guess you could say. And there was some talk as well that the NHL is considering doing that as well. So we know that the NHL has lines of credit available. We've seen them have to run hockey teams before, like the Coyotes, for example, which they did for somewhat of an extended time. So, they have not only the deep pockets, but they also have the credit facilities available to have that, kind of emergency fund, if you will, that they can dip into if they need be. So if they all come up and give each team some money to offset some of the player salaries, maybe that'll be enough to offset a lot of the losses that the owners were talking about that they were trying to get out of the players. So ultimately, maybe the league will kind of be the solution here to using that to kind of help what they wanted to kind of smooth things over. So we'll see. Obviously, it still has to be voted on, and they still have some more details to be finalized, like an exact schedule. Obviously, the 56 games is what's rumored to be where things are at right now. So we're getting real close. So the expectation right now is that if everything goes well, they will kind of hammer out the final details probably over the next couple of days. And then by the end of the week, it should be expected to be put to a vote. And then we'll get each side voting to do their return. So I would think by the end of the week or into the weekend, at the beginning of next week, probably at the latest, unless we hit another snag. But at this point, it's not looking like that. All the other details that need to be finalized are much, easier to overcome, I would think. So theoretically, like I said, within a week or less, ideally less, that we'll have and be able to announce that there's a vote taking place, and hopefully it passes as expected, and we can say we have NHL hockey returning in just a few weeks' time from there. Of course, the World Juniors are getting started too around Christmas Day. I know they've ran into some snags too. There's a lot of positive COVID tests right now that have impacted some of the European teams. I still seem to be pretty confident that return is going to happen and we're going to see that tournament. But there's certainly some concerns on that front as well. Now, with this return as well, I must say one of my other concerns is there's certainly a few NHL markets. I'm not sure exactly how many because I can't keep up with the COVID restrictions and where everything is at in all of those markets. That's a lot. Sometimes it's tough enough to kind of keep up what's going on in your own local area. But I know there's at least a couple of NHL markets for sure, which obviously I'm Canadian, so I follow the Canadian stuff a little bit closer for what's going on in all the Canadian cities and rules, etc. That I wonder if they're going to run into stumbling blocks to be able to open their arenas and get everything going. I don't expect them to be able to have fans at the very least for the first bit of the season. So I don't know. I wonder if for teams like a Montreal or the Winnipeg Jets, for example, or even Calgary and Edmonton. I know that obviously there's a lot of pretty strict restrictions in place right now because the provinces of Ontario and Quebec and Alberta are all surging right now, and for the last little while have been having record-breaking COVID positive cases, on a pretty much a daily basis. So things are not in good situations in those provinces right now. So I'm not sure what the health authorities are going to allow. So I guess you could throw in even the Senators and the Leafs in that matter. So all the Canadian teams to some degree. I don't know exactly what all the rules are going to be, but there's certainly a lot of restrictions in place. So hopefully that won't be an issue. But I know the NHL, I'm sure, has already been in contact with any of these NHL teams. Are having, lack of confidence that they're going to be able to return the way that they need to. Then obviously that, I'm sure, is something that's going to have to be discussed with the local health authorities. Could we see some teams maybe play neutral sites? I would think maybe, but at the same time, that could get really expensive too. So there's still a lot that we're going to learn here over the next week, how this is going to all take place. But the good news is that the biggest hurdle of all has been overcome. And when that goes to a vote here, it is probably as much as 3 or 4 days' time. It's expected to pass. We're expected to have a season. It's just a matter of hammering out some of these last little bit of logistical details. Now, like I said, there's going to be obviously 4 divisions. We're going to have a Canadian division. That's a guarantee at this point. And then we're going to have 3 American divisions. And amongst those divisions, we don't know exactly where. There's a few teams we don't know where they're going to be. Obviously, there'll be an Eastern, Western, and Central to some degree, but some of the teams could kind of go in either direction, like Pittsburgh and Nashville, Minnesota, like the teams that are kind of more east but still somewhat more central than some teams are going to be. I'm not sure where they're going to end up, and obviously some of them are going to be playing Western Conference teams, like especially the Pacific Division teams, more than they probably would have, and may not be happy about that. But at the end of the day here, there's bound to be something here that most teams are not happy with, but hopefully, generally speaking, they're happy with enough of it that we don't hit any more snags. But we're not looking like that. Very positive update, the best update we've had on the NHL return here in quite some time. So let me know your thoughts down below. A 56-game schedule, hopefully getting started on January 13th with training camps opening for at least the 7 teams that didn't make the playoffs in as little as 3 weeks' time. That's phenomenal news, and I'd love to know what you think down below, so let me know your thoughts, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.